Executive Suite with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi.
Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi, and today we have the return of a guest we have before, and a man very well known in Rhode Island, John Hazen White Jr. He is the chairman and CEO of Taco Group. For longtime Rhode Islanders, his father was also John Hazen White, so you're looking at the younger John Hazen White Jr., who is now in charge of his family's company. John, thanks for being here.
It's great to be here, Tim.
So right off the top, as I said, people in Rhode Island know Taco. They know your family's name, but they might not know exactly what your business is. It's been in Rhode Island since the 1920s, I know.
1920,
but
yeah.
what do you actually do at Taco for the folks at home?
So TACO is an acronym, actually, for Thermal Appliance Company. And actually, we've changed the name and the identity this year to TACO Comfort Solutions. What TACO is a company that manufactures products, makes products in Rhode Island, right? The application would be for comfort control, for heating and air conditioning, comfort and efficiency. Most important thing for people now is to be comfortable at an efficient point. So that's really our focus. We make little pumps and little valves and big pumps and big valves and all kinds of equipment for heating and air conditioning for both commercial and residential.
And it all goes into getting people at the temperature they want inside to keep them comfortable.
Yeah, so we're feeling good about ourselves, right?
So last time I looked at these stats, I think this is such an interesting statistic. A number of years ago, I think maybe around the time you took over, Taco was doing about $35 million a year in sales, and you had about 500 employees. Now you're doing over $200 million in sales, still have about 500 employees. How'd you manage that?
Yeah, so it's a little convoluted, but yes. 1992, when I became sort of put in this role, 500 people and about 35 million, whatever, yeah. And now it's over 200 with the same. But how? A couple of ways. You know, most people would say productivity improvements, right? Yeah, okay, productivity improvements, surely, of course. But loyalty, dependency, education of the employees. We are a family that work together to drive this company forward like no other company I've ever seen. So people actually, in my company, actually care about doing the best they can to make this company go. So there's no attrition. I mean, if I lose 2 people a year, it's a lot. It's under 0.5%. These people know what they're doing, how to do it. I've always believed that if you have a problem to be solved, go to the person who's doing what needs to be solved, because they have forgotten more about what they do than the rest of us will ever know. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of truth to that. So that's how we've gotten there. We now, with a company in Vietnam, a company in China, a couple of companies in China, a company in Italy now, and a company in Canada and the States, we have just a little under 1,000. So we're getting, but if you take Taco here, right, it's still the same 500.
And people, another interesting thing with the backstory, and we're going to get to what's happening now and what's happening next, but is when you took over the company and when you really got involved in the early 90s, you weren't necessarily handed a company in perfect condition. Your father had worked hard, but that was a very difficult time, right?
Yeah, this is an interesting point, Ted. Because people, whenever there's a blog or something out there that I get mentioned, and everybody writes into it to say, he got his wealth the old-fashioned way, inherited. Man, if people knew what I inherited, they'd run, not walk. But it was a company that was, in fact, in tough financial straits at the time, and so 4 or 5 of us got together. It was interesting. My father backed off a little bit then, because we had a plan and we presented it to him. He said, okay, go for it. You got 6 months to see what happens. And he backed away and let us kind of run and watch closely. And we, 5 or 6 of us, turned that, and by the way, some of those folks are still with me, and we turned that place around. Not only those 5 or 6, but the other 500, the rest of those 500 people came right to the front and absolutely dove in and helped solve this problem. And so it's been an incredible, it was a roller coaster ride. Now it's becoming more like I just hopped on a surfboard, right?
Yeah,
right?
It's fast moving.
It's an incredible wave.
And let's talk about that wave. So one of the reasons I wanted to have you on today is discuss, you just did a major acquisition. You alluded to it a moment ago. You bought an Italian pump manufacturer. I'm going to let you pronounce their name. What's the name?
Askoll.
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 Is your Italian getting better now that you've done this?
Evidently, according to them.
Yeah. You don't know what you signed, maybe, but we hope you did. So talk about this, though. Why was this a good deal for Taco? Why was it a big deal for Taco?
So like everything else, the government is beginning to regulate the products that we manufacture, just like light bulbs and refrigerators and all of that, and from an energy efficiency standpoint. So we have the technology to move ahead with the government regulations. But what this has allowed us is to buy a completely developed, forward-moving, existing company with technology which is not only maybe ahead of ours a little bit, but also refined. It's a big deal because once you develop a product, you've got to refine the thing. I've been through this 100 times in my life. I just didn't really want to do it again this time because I had an opportunity not to, and that was. Now, if you remember a few years back, we created the relationship with this company. Do you remember that? Where we came into a kind of a joint, not a joint deal, but a partnership.
Yeah, you were talking about doing R&D together, that kind of thing.
And building their products here for the U.S. market. And then the opportunity came up this past year to acquire them. And the owner of that company in Italy and myself had developed a very, very solid friendship, and relationship. And so we proceeded. And it's a company with high ethical standards, highly regarded business practices. So it's just been a great, and I think it's going to now allow Taco, what they manufacture again is a high efficiency product, but the little circulator pumps that we put on our boilers to whiz the water around the baseboard and whatnot, and it's highly efficient, and this has just been a thing that aside from having now the technology, it's allowed us a footprint in the European market. Mm-hmm. So now we can go both ways. So I think number one, it's going to allow us to take Taco to a whole different level. Maybe we've talked about this. I have a theory on product lines, company life cycles, all the people, and that is that we have these thresholds. And between these thresholds, we can tweak, we can improve, we can cost reduce, we can whatever. But when we hit a certain point, our product life cycle is over. Now it's time to go to a whole different thing. And that's what this was. We hit one of those sort of thresholds, and now we've gone to the next level. Now we can take Taco, I think, to on a multiple of what we are now in terms of size.
Now, acquisitions can go both ways, as you know well, for companies. If people aren't judicious about the acquisitions they make and grow too fast or it doesn't fit strategically, do you think you could do a lot more acquisitions? Is this a new phase for Taco, or is this a specific example where, of course, you did this deal, but you're still going to be careful in other cases?
Great question. I think for Taco to continue to grow, we'll do more acquisitions. But here's the hard part. Getting into this this environment that we're now in, which is acting like a big company instead of a fuzzy little company, which we always will have. Listen, Johnny White ain't going anywhere, right? The fuzzy little experiment that Johnny's run will always be run the same way, excepting value-wise, but we have to act now like a big company. And getting into the new financial world we're in, which is all good, right? But it's different. So we have to, and then, once we prove ourselves here, which we already have, I mean, the banks have been so great. Now we're working with multiple banks as opposed to one bank. It's a big difference, and they want to be part of us because we're a winner, right? We've proven that year after year after year. But now once we get through this first phase of this, we'll probably have to do another acquisition or two or three to get where I want the company to be in 5 years. So it's a different, we're not an acquisition, Ted, we have not been an acquisition-oriented company.
Which is part of why this stood out to me, exactly, yeah.
We've grown by that tweaking kind of method, right? And here we are to launch ours, and I have to do that to protect the company. Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk much more with John Hazen White Jr. about the past, present, and future of Taco, and maybe a little politics. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi, and we're talking today with John Hazen White Jr., the longtime chief of Taco, which is based in Cranston, but growing quite a bit right now, which is what we've been talking about. We were talking about the Italian acquisition you just had, John, but you mentioned earlier, too, you talked about Vietnam, China. For people who think of Taco as Cranston, how far around the world are you operating geographically these days at Taco?
Well, we actually... we did an acquisition about 3 years ago of a company in Nashville, Tennessee, that makes a different kind of product than we do, but they make pumps for agriculture and mining. Okay, And they actually had facilities all over the country. We're all over the country, of course, we have been forever. But they have facilities all over the country. They also had, which came with the acquisition, a foundry manufacturing stainless steel parts in Vietnam. I pushed off on that for a year because I didn't like what I had all the thoughts that, sweatshops and child labor. So I spent some time there and I learned about it. My goodness, what a great country and what a great place this is. It's like walking into TACO in Cranston, Rhode Island. It's clean and it's safe and it's happy. So we moved ahead with that, and that's just been a great thing for us. So we're there. We have several facilities in China for sourcing products. And this is an important point. I'm going to come back. And now the company in Italy. It's important for people to understand we're not we don't run to China for costs and whatnot, but I have made a conscious decision in the last 30 years not to chase cheap labor. I won't do it because I've got the best workforce in the world in Cranston, Rhode Island, okay, and in Fall River, Massachusetts. And so I'm not going anywhere on the labor side, but it is imperative for a company like mine to chase worldwide material price. I can't compete if I don't have the same material, because a huge part of my P&L, my profit and loss statement, revolves around materials.
Of course,
price.
yeah.
Steel and copper and all the things we buy. So it's important to be able to buy those things the way all my competitors buy them.
I want to ask you on the China thing. I've seen there have been a couple studies out the last couple years, really interesting, about just how hard hit Rhode Island was by the rise of China, the rise of cheap labor from abroad because of the mix of manufacturers we had. And as you well know, a lot of your peers are gone, Brown and Sharp, others who were around when you got into this business. They often say we had no choice. We had to either move those jobs overseas or we couldn't compete with fell apart. You found a different way. Do you think those companies could have if they tried a different approach, or do you think you were in the right industry, maybe the right well positioned to be able to strategically work around that in a way?
I think in fairness to all of those companies that have left, I would have to spend a lot of time understanding their business. The costume jewelry business, I don't know. That's a tough one, right? Mm-hmm. The guys that have succeeded in staying here, Tommy Tannery, people like that, they have shifted their business model to something else. The coding or the things that they can do without a lot of the labor that might be involved and benefited from offshore. Whenever you find your labor content outweighs your material cost, then you must look at the cheap labor. I don't have that situation. Mm-hmm. So in fairness, I don't know about Brown & Sharp. I never understood that one. Because they had a great thing going, right? And yet the Japanese, holy mackerel, imagine competing with those guys in the 70s and 80s on machinery, right? There was nothing like those people. And so I can't speak for them. I can only speak for me, and this frustrates me, Ted. But I don't mean to go off here, but one of the things I saw in the study done by the Brookings, and believe me, I'm on the board at the Brookings, and I'm all for those guys, but the notion of having to chase biotech, biomed, high tech,
they call it all advanced industries.
Advanced whatever, right. You know what? We have a workforce here which is the best in the world. I would put my little company up against any company in the world in terms of its workforce and their capability. Yet we seem to think we have to go to another level all the time. We have a great workforce that would be wonderful at manufacturing. Could be advanced manufacturing, but at manufacturing, we don't spend enough time chasing those kind of jobs. They're out there. There's somebody out there in the world every day that wakes up in this country and says, my job today is to find a place to move my company. Well, damn it, we ought to be focused on how to get those people here. And it's not rocket science. There's a few things we could do to make it. Boy, to sell our workforce to these people, all we have to do is bring some of these people into TACO. I mean, I've never seen anything like it anywhere in the world.
You are always viewed also as an outlier because of the amount you have invested in worker training, and you hear from so many other employers, even on this show, can't afford it. Our workers are not trained to the level we need when they get to our building, and we don't have the money or the resources or whatever to invest in those people to bring them where they need to be.
I didn't either at one time. By the way, I'm viewed as an outlier in most areas, right?
That's true, including your hair.
I'm pretty good with that, okay? But look at my glasses.
Yeah.
But I didn't have the money to do it either when we started. But my dad and I made the decision, and we were propositioned by Wilmington, North Carolina, to move half that company down there in about 80, I don't know, 88, 89. And we sat and looked each other in the eye and said, what do we lose? Look at what we're gaining. Wow, tax breaks, child care, all the free loans in the world you could imagine. What are we losing? Our people. Not a bet we were willing to take. So let's invest in them. Oh, that cost us. But in the long term, I have never allowed a return to be put on the cost of educating those people and training them and all that stuff, because the moment I do that, I cheapen it. I don't want people to ever think we've done that for them to better themselves just so we could better ourselves. I want people to be better, and that's why we've done it. And the offshoot and the result is we have some really wonderful, dedicated, loyal people, and you can't beat that.
You're going to be lining up to apply for jobs when they watch this.
That company could take on any company in the world.
Yeah. We're going to take another break. When we come back, we're going to talk more with John Hazen White Jr. about TACO and Rhode Island's economy. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi, and we're talking today with John Hazen White Jr. from TACO, talking business, talking Rhode Island, talking all things TACO. And John, I wanted to ask I have some Rhode Island questions, but just first, I'm just curious. I always like to talk to businesses about just their read on the economy at the moment. How's business looking in 2016 as you look at what's coming in, how revenue looks, et cetera? Are you feeling any of the jitters about the economy? Some have saying.
I try to rise above that. Yeah, of course, we all have those. I have bigger problems in the economy, and that's the weather. I'm in a weather-related business. I depend on cold weather. However, I'm also in the commercial construction HVAC business, comfort solutions business. And the good news is when it's warm like this, the residential business falls off a bit. The commercial business can continue to happen, okay, because the weather allows for it. So it balances, always balances. So I'm rather bold this year about growth and about prospects and with the Italian acquisition, I think it provides us. So from TACO's perspective, I feel pretty good. For other people, I don't know if there's just more of the same for people. It could be a rough ride ahead. Who knows what happens with the interest rates are beginning to creep, and who knows what.
So we've had, ever since Governor Raimondo took office, the General Assembly leaders have been talking a lot about economic development, initiatives they think will help on that front. You've been watching Rhode Island policymakers for a long time. You've given them advice, solicited and unsolicited at times.
Outlier advice.
Right. So what do you think in the last a little over a year now of under the new administration and with do you see things moving in the direction you want? Do you see things you're worried about? What's your overall sense at the moment?
With Gina, I have a profound sense of hope. I think she's a wonderful person and a good friend, and I always worry a little bit that the focus becomes too much on taxation versus the only way to ever fix the problems of this state is to increase the number of taxpayers. We will never fix this state by raising taxes.
They'll grow the pie.
It's nonsense, because people like me and others will leave here, and it becomes a law of diminishing returns, if you will. I don't know if that really is what I mean, but I've heard that in college or somewhere once. But if people like me continue to leave here, the tax base is, and many more, the tax base is going to, as it goes down, the tax burden is going to increase on those left, and that's just not good. So I always worry. So one place to start is to match up with Massachusetts and Connecticut. They're our competitors, right? They're just across the border. So if people are looking to shift somehow, they're going to. We've looked in the past, and I tell you, this legislature can be really good about this. One time we looked at moving over to Massachusetts, and then we looked at the North Carolina thing. And I actually was able to work with these guys to get some economic development stuff put in place on to keep us in Rhode Island, not just TACO. This was not a TACO bill. This was a economic development bill in matching up with Massachusetts on the enterprise zone and the investment tax credits. Okay, this is years ago. But they did. They came right to the front and worked with the business community on this. And So it's doable, but those are the places we have to look. You drive down Route 6, I always say, why is it that people are always turning right to buy their stuff as opposed to turning left, right? You know what I'm talking about.
Right here where we are at the Seekonk EP line, yeah.
Right, we need to, that tax proposal that the previous governor had, I never understood it because it just, we need to bring things down, not try to configure them differently and mask this and do that. You know what I'm saying? I just think we need to compete with our competitors.
So that brings up the hot button issue at the moment, this truck toll proposal. We've heard the Rhode Island Manufacturing Association has come out against it. What's your take at the moment? You have suppliers, you have things come in by truck?
Yeah, I mean, to raise the truck tolls, I think could be very problematic because either they're going to go somewhere else or around the thing, or more importantly, our freight costs are going to go up, and I don't. That's never a good thing to raise a manufacturer's freight. Imagine how much stuff I'm bringing in here. It's not coming from Rhode Island, right? So whatever. I think. Now, if I may be bold and say I'm not sure about the whole issue of tolls. We own a vacation home way up in Maine. My whole family does, and we split it up, and so we get about a week a year. But anyway. I tell you, you drive from here to there. First of all, anybody that comes to visit, about the first thing out of their mouth is, "What is with you guys with these roads? My goodness!"
You mean when they come to visit Rhode Island, right?
Yeah, it's like a minefield driving through, and it is. It's terrible. Not only that, but when they repair something or bury a pipe, they don't even fix it right. Drive along Pawtucket Avenue sometime. That's a real catastrophe. But you drive up through New Hampshire and Vermont and Maine. And it's like driving through Florida, who has no weather issues, right? By the way, so I don't know if there's a program that could be talked about with a real toll system that was. But again, any notion of tax increases or cost increases to people in the state is never a good one.
So finally, we only have about a minute left. You've been committed to Rhode Island a long time as a businessman. Do you ever think about? Can you ever see yourself running for office? People always wonder.
Some guy said to me in the gym the other day, "Oh my God, is that who I think it is?" I said, yeah, who do you think it is? He said, "Well, is it Johnny's wife?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, I saw you one time up at the State House where nobody likes to see you." And I said, "Yeah, watch out. Because if I don't like what I'm seeing going down the road, baby." You
would do it.
I don't know, but if enough people said, "Hey," then maybe we'd think about it.
Yeah,
you never say never.
Never rule anything out. How about Taco's commitment to Rhode Island? As strong as ever? Any looking at other places? Any consideration on that?
Ted, I will tell you what I have in Rhode Island, in the workforce itself, would just jump up and say to me, "Johnny White, don't you think of another thought." I am so committed to this state, and more importantly, to those 500 people than anything in my life. I'm not going anywhere.
All right. Well, you heard it from the man himself, John Hazen White Jr. from Taco. Thank you very much for joining me.
Great to be here.
And thank you for joining us on this week's edition of Executive Suite. Remember, you can catch all our episodes online on WPRI.com. They're also on the radio Sunday nights and on iTunes as a podcast. See you back here next week.